And I'm delighted to be joined today by the very fabulous Anna Jackson. Anna, hi, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Tamsin. Very good.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me. So, Anna is an experienced therapist registered with the Health and Care Professions Council. She's trained in a range of therapeutic approaches, including CBT, EMDR, and hypnotherapy. I'm going to make sure that she explains to us what all those things are shortly. During her career, Anna has become increasingly aware that specialist therapy skills can be of significant value to people during and following the breakdown of a relationship. This is particularly so if the therapist understands the varied dynamics. An amicable split is at one end of the spectrum, and the complexities of narcissistic abuse are at the other. And you'll know, if you've listened to our podcast regularly, that we have people who have experience of varying ends of those spectrums joining us to talk as well. So, hi Anna. I'd love you to start off by telling me what the different therapeutic approaches are that I talked about in the introduction. So, shall we start with CBT? Can you explain what it is, what it means, what it does, how it works?
Okay, yes, absolutely. So CBT stands for Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. Um, Often, even that as a title doesn't really make much sense to anybody, but it involves looking at thoughts, feelings, and behaviours in essence. So, for any of us going through life, incidents create a thought, and then often from thoughts come our feelings, and then behaviours come as a result. Um, any one of us reacts in different ways from each other, and CBT is about understanding our own way of responding to situations. With regard to the breakdown of a relationship, CBT can be really useful in spotting patterns of our own and patterns of our partner, and how we might choose to proceed as a result of that understanding.
Okay, so I was talking to somebody last night who was talking about her own experiences of CBT. And I'm afraid she was talking a little negatively, but different therapies, suit different people, as we know. And she said to me that to her CBT was having to work out which emoji you were, kind of a range of faces that had different emotions, and it was working out which one. It does that ring true about CBT with you, or is that not quite what it is?
That confuses me, actually. I don't
Okay,
know. I don't know. I've never come across that at
okay,
all in my CBT career. Um, it's not to say that another therapist might not use it. I don't know, but that's not what I use. And I
okay.
completely get what you're saying in that some therapists suit some people and not others. So CBT isn't a fix-all mode of therapy, and that's why I feel that being trained in a range of options gives people the choice. So if one isn't feeling right or doesn't fit the bill for that person, then another one can be employed. And I'm still understanding where that person's at. So for some people, CBT might be useful at one point of the therapy process, and then a different approach might be useful at another stage of somebody's life, or transition through a relationship breakdown. But my description of CBT to you was a very basic level. On a more complex level, you can treat um, things like anxiety, which again is linked to relationship breakdowns often, low mood, um, what else? Self-esteem, self-compassion, all of those things I feel can be very much relevant to relationship breakdowns and starting again afterwards. So I'm sorry, I don't understand the emoji thing, but
No, that's
each
fine.
to
That's
our own.
fine. I just wanted to ask you the question. So is just so that I understand a little bit clearer, is CBT a talking therapy? If I come to see you and have CBT, am I sitting in a chair and you're sitting in a chair and we're just talking, or are there activities that we're going to be doing?
Great question. It does involve talking. It can also involve mapping out an understanding of what's going on for somebody in their life with their own thoughts, feelings, behaviours, and potentially, how that interacts with other people. It also, big part is the behavioural element. So it might be going out and experimenting or testing beliefs in certain situations as well. So, there is an experimental side. And of course, all of that is done in conjunction with, it's collaborative. So I'm not going to be saying, you need to go out and do this. It's something where I work with the client and they decide what they want to work on. And together we find a way forward that feels right and manageable, while sometimes pushing the boundaries a bit so that new ways forward can be found and become comfortable if that's what somebody wants.
So there might be a bit of mutually agreed homework to go.
Absolutely, yes, homework. I hate that word. It makes me sound like a teacher, and that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. But yes, there are homework tasks. I generally like to think that they are positive ones, and I mean, what's the point of doing homework if it's not going to be beneficial?
Absolutely. I think the reason I asked that was because obviously some therapy just takes place largely within the room and at that time and place, and whilst you might process what's happened and work your way through it in your mind, there's not necessarily a thing to go and do in the
absolutely
class. Whereas
yeah,
CBT
that's a great question.
More like there's actual things that you can work on that are task related, let's say.
Absolutely I'm so glad you've asked that, actually. A therapy session is 1 hour often in a whole week. It's not going to impact life that much unless there are opportunities to continue the process outside of sessions. So thank you for asking. I missed that bit out.
So the next one in your introduction is EMDR. What on earth is that?
Okay, great question. So for a start off, EMDR stands for Eye Movement Reprocessing and Desensitization. It's a therapy which is recognised by the National Institute of Clinical Excellence as being a treatment of choice for trauma. It can be used to treat other things as well. Describing it is possibly not the easiest thing, but in essence, when we go through a trauma in life, for example, our body and our mind store it in a way that is unique to each individual. So by using EMDR, we help that memory that is stored to be reprocessed and stored again in a way that is less emotionally intense. So some people, unfortunately, in life, because life isn't always one smooth run, is it? Have traumatic incidents in life which leave them with flashbacks, nightmares, recurring dreams that are difficult, anxiety in everyday life. EMDR can help to treat all of that. So I've talked a bit about what it can do and what it works on, but it's called eye movement reprocessing because often it does utilise eye movements. Sometimes it can use other things to help reprocess the memory. So it's not just around eye movements. And I suppose describing it is not easy, but in a session when people are undertaking EMDR, they will discover that memories are processed very readily and more speedily than other talking therapies. So it's amazingly effective.
Is EMDR what I might know as tapping?
No, that's EFT.
Right.
Having said that,
letters mixed up.
It's all right, easily done. Having said that, people do use tapping as an alternative to eye movements actually in EMDR, so you're not far wrong. I just mentioned other things can be used. I didn't say that tapping can be. So thanks for asking.
What I'm really confused by this one. What are you actually doing when you're doing EMDR? I know this might be too difficult to explain, because we obviously want to explain so that people listening rather than just viewing can understand. But I mean, eye movement, to me, my eyes they blink or they close or they're open.
Okay. It's a great question.
I'm struggling.
Well, there is an EMDR association in the UK, and if anybody wants to check that out, it will give a whole host of explanations. But to be succinct, again, I would sit in a room with somebody. When undertaking EMDR, I would be at a slight angle from them if we're doing the eye movement, so that people don't look at me. They're looking at my fingers moving from side to side in a well, I can, from side to side, from my shoulder height outwards to the length of my arm and then back again. And that gives people a good range of eye movements whilst they think about the trauma or keep part of that trauma in mind. And that naturally processes things. It sounds unusual, but it has been highly studied and researched, and it works.
That's amazing.
It is amazing.
I'm going to look into that a little bit more. I've never come across that, but
it is amazing, and it's not widely known. So I think your questions are great. I'm sorry I'm not as good as I'd like to be at explaining exactly what goes on and how it works. Because to a degree,
when you're trying to explain it without waving your arms around.
Yeah,
I always
exactly.
find that difficult. And the last one is hypnotherapy. Now, I've had hypnotherapy a couple of times. In fact, I had it for a good few months. It helped me through a real emotional trauma. I had a bit of a breakdown, quite a long way post-divorce, but it's one of the reasons that I suggest that people have therapy during their divorce, because I think if you don't, it'll hit you like a train at some point.
Absolutely,
it hit me like a train, and I used hypnotherapy, and it was fantastic for me. But I have to say, because I'm a cynical soul, which is not a great thing, but anyway, I am. And when I went to see the hypnotherapist, I was a bit nervous, because back when I was young, hypnotherapy hypnosis used to be done for people's entertainment. You used to get hypnotists with their watches that you would watch the watch swinging, and you'd be hypnotized, and they'd have you pretending to be a chicken, or making yourself look really silly on stage. I'm not very good at not being in control. So my fear was, what on earth are they going to do to me that I'm not going to remember, that I'm not going to know about?
Absolutely.
And how is I didn't even know if I could be hypnotized, I guess. I'm going to ask you to describe it to us first, and then I'll perhaps tell you a bit more about my experience with it. But what's your view of what hypnotherapy is and how it can help?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm really grateful for your introduction of it there and your perception, because you're not alone. That's a really common set of concerns. And I think entertainment hypnotists have obviously been more widely viewed than clinical hypnotherapists, because it's a confidential service. It's not something that is out there for people to view, because it is confidential. It's a personal thing. So clinical hypnotherapy is about helping people to induce a trance-like state within a session. So any of us, at any point in, well, not at any point in life, but all of us have the capacity to induce a trance for ourselves. So for me, it might be lying on a beach. I'm sort of in that half awake, half asleep state. Some people driving to work, they're not thinking, what gear am I in? Which way am I going now? They're just driving to work on automatic pilot. That's a trance-like state as well. So we can all access that on a daily life when we're in a comfortable position. So it means that you can think about other things whilst you're driving, for example. So in clinical hypnotherapy, we help someone to induce that very relaxed state, and during that state, we can allow somebody to be receptive to the suggestions they want to be receiving. So we would talk a lot beforehand about what messages they want to have strongly within themselves, how they want to go forward in life, what they want to come to terms with. All of those sorts of things would be included in the therapy session. The question about control is a great one. At any point, if a hypnotherapist says something to somebody that doesn't agree with their belief system, their values, or anything about their sense of what's right and wrong, somebody will immediately come out of the trance. That's just the way it works. So at no point will somebody, yeah, it is. So the people, if we go back to entertainment hypnotists, the people that are on the stage want to be up there doing the daft things, eating onions, wandering around in their underpants or whatever. You know, it's not something that somebody going for a clinical hypnotherapy session is going to want to do. And if any therapist said anything that wasn't appropriate, the person wouldn't be able to keep in the trance. They'd be aware and awake and wondering what the heck's going on. So it is a safe practice from that regard, in that you would immediately come out of it. Yeah. Is there any bit that I haven't answered? Anything else that I haven't answered? Because it was quite.
I don't think so. That your description of that being on the beach and being half awake and half asleep is a really good description of it. It's very much how I felt. I was. So the hypnotherapist that I went to sat me down, made me comfortable on a sofa. We talked for a long time, as you said, about the situation, about things that I was concerned about things that I wanted to work on. And before she hypnotised me, she put a blanket over my knees, because she said your body temperature sometimes drops when you go into this it's a very deeply relaxed state, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
This state that you're talking about, and then as I was going through it, at no time did I not know what was going on. I knew exactly what she was saying to me and exactly what was happening.
Yeah.
When I came round again, I didn't remember what had been said and what had happened, but I knew at the time that I felt safe and comfortable with everything that was being said to me.
Absolutely, that's the key, really. And if anybody goes to any therapist, it's absolutely vital that you feel comfortable with them. If you meet a therapist and you don't feel comfortable, don't pursue it.
Leave.
That is, it really is a key to any successful therapy. You've got to feel you can trust the person you're with, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, and I suppose with hypnotherapy, people have got to want to allow themselves to get into that relaxed state, otherwise it won't work. And that's fine, everybody's different. But that's the good thing about having other therapeutic approaches available, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have to say that after my sessions, I always went home and I was exhausted, absolutely exhausted. I'd have to go to bed for a few hours and sleep. I felt like because it's to do with your subconscious processing, it's working really, really hard during the session, even though you're in this deeply relaxed state.
Yeah.
You just come out and feel so tired. And then the other thing I experienced was very, very vivid, bizarre dreams for the kind of coming few days, which my therapist had me writing down and sort of exploring those with her next time I went. And I just find it a really fascinating process. For me, it was because it felt like we were actually working on something rather than just talking about something. For me, I felt that it was that we was taking steps forward.
Absolutely. And what you've just said about dreams or other ideas coming to you between the sessions is, I said, that is part of the natural human desire to heal. So once you've opened that idea of healing and addressing issues, your body will naturally provide the next thing to work on, which is exactly what happened. How fantastic. That's great.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah,
it is
fascinating. It's not the first place I would have started, it was suggested to me by one of my colleagues actually, who said, why don't you go and see this lady called Susan? Why don't you go and see Susan, because she deals with, you know, trauma, and yeah, what an experience it was. It was fantastic. Good. Okay, I mean, that's really useful to hear what those different types of therapies are. How do you go about, because we've talked about different people suit different therapies, and do you have a conversation in the first instance with somebody who's going through a relationship breakdown about the different therapies that are available and what might suit them, or would you be more like a pharmacist and say, think this would be best for you, or how does that process work?
Very good question. I do meet with people first of all. In fact, I meet people, it could be just a conversation for 15 minutes to talk about what their issues are. They can ask me questions. That's all, you know, free of charge, and a chance for them to decide if they want to bother meeting me or not. Completely fine. When I do meet with people, we have a conversation about the issues that are going on for them. Everybody has a chance to ask me questions about what I could offer, and I will, you know, it's a collaboration really between clinical judgment and somebody's wishes. So as you've just, you know, asked a lot of questions about different sorts of therapies, I might have an idea as a clinician which one might be more helpful in the situation that somebody's in that particular moment. But it would be you know, it's definitely up to the person coming to see me to decide which one they want to pursue first. Yeah, because who am I to say what's best for somebody if they know their situation? It's about my expertise and their expert view of their situation joining together and coming to a decision, really. Yeah. And that can move throughout therapy potentially. So, you know, at the beginning of seeing somebody, for example, it might be a really traumatic time in the midst of a relationship breakdown, loads of anxiety, no idea where to go, what to do, what decision to make. And then having a clinician saying, do you know what, I think this might help you to feel less anxious and more settled in the current moment. How does that sound? And we could take it from there. You know, when things feel more calm, or if somebody knows exactly what they want, then we go with that. Yeah.
I like that. That sounds really good. So we know that relationship breakdown is in itself a traumatic experience, and my recommendation to any of my clients is always to go and seek professional help with these things, because what you don't want to do is download to your divorce lawyer who's charging you an absolute fortune per hour about your emotional issues, because they're also not qualified to deal with them. So yeah, I would always send somebody to a professional. But there is a whole kind of even more traumatic experience that some people go through when their relationship breaks down because of abuse that they've experienced during that relationship, whether it's a marriage or whether it's a cohabitation relationship, or even even just not a cohabitation. It must just be a relationship that's had abusive tendencies. How do you deal with those situations differently to how you would deal with somebody going through I don't want to say normal, but you know what I mean, a non-abusive relationship breakdown?
Okay, so how would I deal with it differently? I think I've alluded to a little bit about how I might deal with it differently in the last answer, but you know, if somebody's going through, and I agree with you, there is no necessarily normal relationship breakdown because everybody's individual or relationships are different, but some might be less traumatic than others. I suppose maybe that's the way I should phrase it. So in those situations, I think people going through that split have possibly more space in their mind and psychological makeup and life to think, okay, what do I need from therapy? And they can come with a very clear idea of their aims and goals and needs and wishes, which makes it a bit more straightforward. when somebody is in the midst of an abusive relationship breakdown, it can be so what's the word? It can be so traumatic, I suppose, that people are in a position where making decisions about therapy is beyond them. Yeah. They can be bombarded with all sorts of psychological abuse, maybe physical stuff if they're still engaged with that person in one way or another in the same environment. So in those scenarios, I think I would probably be offering what I think is the best type of therapy and allowing them to choose. So I think if somebody is still in the midst of traumatic scenarios, then hypnotherapy is a useful tool, allowing a little bit of downtime, relaxation in the session, but also a recording that they can take away with them to use as downtime if they wish, just to allow that fight or flight response a little bit of an opportunity to simmer down for a bit. That makes sense.
Yeah,
so hypnotherapy can be really useful in that way. Also, people going through traumatic breakdowns might have struggled sleeping. So again, hypnotherapy recordings to help induce sleep can be another useful thing. There's another therapy that I haven't actually talked about yet, and that's emotional freedom therapy. And that can also be called tapping. And that's something where I can teach people to use the technique which helps them bring their own anxiety levels down quite quickly and easily. So that's another thing I can offer to people in a traumatic situation, because often relationships that are involving abuse can end up going to court. Even that scenario is anxiety provoking and concerning. So again, hypnotherapy, EFT can be really useful. The others, once people are moving a bit further along in that relationship breakdown, or maybe when they've finished it in a traumatic setting, managing the trauma is a big one. So, and also understanding what has gone on for them, coming to terms with the relationship itself. Sometimes people are in relationships not realizing actually that person they were with had personality disorder potentially. In the case of narcissistic abuse, people can have long relationships with somebody and suddenly discover they are not the person they thought they were. That takes quite a lot of coming to terms with. So CBT can be useful in that scenario, helping people to understand, find a new way forward, and accept themselves and the way they were in that relationship, I suppose. So in terms of other traumas, so again, it could be physical, sexual, psychological. EMDR is a really great one. So it doesn't take away memories, but it allows people to, I suppose, not feel the emotional intensity connected to the memory of the trauma. So each trauma can be worked on through EMDR, or maybe a series of traumas can be worked on, and they're stored still within the person, but not with the same emotional intensity. So for me, having a range of clinical skills that can be utilised at different points in a relationship split up can be useful. And particularly if somebody is, they've built up a relationship with a therapist and repeating everything that's gone on again to a new therapist can feel like another ordeal that is not necessarily wanted to be experienced. So hopefully, having it all in one space allows people that choice to move from, the initial stages of a relationship breakdown through the process to living a satisfied, happy life post-split. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing is that you're not necessarily 100% fixed that time. You might finish that lot of therapy and something else might just click later on, and you need to go back, and it's not I think we're not great at therapy in this country, and I know Americans tend to, they all have a therapist, don't they, and you know,
Yeah,
we're not quite at that point in this country. But you know, I wouldn't hesitate if I was feeling that I needed some additional emotional support. I wouldn't hesitate but to go back and see a therapist again, you know,
I agree. I
for
wouldn't either.
whatever. You know, I think it's not it's more a sign of strength than a sign of weakness to go and get yourself sorted so that you can be the best version of you.
Absolutely,
And I think we
yeah.
need to, the more we talk about it in this country, the more likely it is that we normalise these things.
Without a doubt, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So if somebody comes to work with you, and this may be an impossible question to answer, but how long would you expect to be working with somebody? Is it, I'm assuming that the world wasn't conquered in one session, so I would expect it to be a series of different sessions, but kind of average, how long would you expect, or is that too difficult to answer?
I think that's a great question, and you're absolutely right in that it's a difficult one to answer. It depends what somebody wants to work on. You know, if somebody turns up saying, I'm really anxious, I can't sleep, and I'm going through a divorce, I just want something to help me, you know, like hypnotherapy to help me get off to sleep so that I can manage each day more rested, then it probably wouldn't be many sessions at all. You know, we'd have an initial session, an introduction to hypnotherapy, a recording, and then they're off on the way. That's fine. If it's a relationship that has lots of trauma, for example, I don't know, narcissistic abuse, where there might be lies, a smear campaign, relationships with family and friends have been impacted negatively, so their own natural support systems are not available anymore, then it would be a longer process potentially. But that is something that I would always discuss with the person. It's not for me to decide, it's up to that person, and where they're at with their struggles or not, as the case may be. Yeah. So I'm sorry I can't be more clear on that, really.
No, that's would you from what you've said, I feel like it's potentially a number of months rather than a number of years.
Yeah, I would. I mean, my way of working, I don't want people to be coming along to see me for years unnecessarily. I don't think it's helpful for anybody. The more minimal opportunity to get a good outcome is my way of thinking in all scenarios, really. So, you know, if we can tackle it in the shortest number of sessions, and then somebody goes off, practices whatever we've done, experiments, gets on with life, that's great. If they decide actually there's a bit more I need to work on and pop back, absolutely. I don't think I would ever be seeing anybody for years. Unless, of course, they wanted to, and the traumas. But with EMDR, I wouldn't have thought that was necessary for very many people at all. So, yeah, I don't know if I've properly answered it, but definitely not years.
I would say I think I had 4 or 5 sessions. Decided I was fixed, and said, "No, I'm all right now. I don't need to see you again." And within a week was going, "No, forget that, I'm not fixed yet, I need to come back," and kind of restarted it because it didn't feel like we were there, although kind of in the moment I felt like I was. So I think that's something to be aware of, you know, even if you feel like you're fixed one minute, don't think you can't go back, because therapists, I'm sure, are used to to that situation.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, what I like to do is plan for endings of sessions. So, you know, there'd be hopefully, you know, a discussion around, you know, what do you need going forward, anything outstanding that we could just round things off with. And obviously, as you've just said, you know, there is opportunity to go back and readdress things, or, you know, if new things pop up, or you recognise things weren't resolved as fully as you wanted them to be, then yeah, absolutely, go back and back to the drawing board.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Is there anything that we've not covered today that you would like to add?
I don't think so. No.
Awesome.
Nothing springing to mind. But
Fantastic. In that case, can you let our listeners and viewers know how they can get hold of you if they would like to come and work with you?
Okay, well, my website is outsidetheboxtherapies.co.uk. From there will be contact details, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with people in the first instance around what their needs are and what I can offer, so they can make a decision on moving forward with me or not, if they wish. Entirely up to people's choice. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you,
fantastic.
Tamsin.
Anna, it's been brilliant as always to chat to you. Thank you for coming to join me. We will put a link to your website in the show notes from today, so that people can just click on that and get hold of you through your contact details on there. So thank you for joining me. Thank you everybody for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed that insight into some of the different therapies that are available.
Thank you. Bye.